This is the venerable Power Macintosh 6500-250, Apple's high-end prosumer workstation from 1997. Unfortunately, it's also pretty boring. So today, we're going to spice it up a little bit and install a bunch of weird operating systems. So stay tuned. And if you enjoy torturing old computers with weird versions of Linux, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. This poor Power Macintosh 6500 was originally released back in 1997, the height of Apple's malaise era, where they built a ton of questionable beige Macs, most with rather dubious quality. Based on the Gazelle architecture, it housed a reasonably powerful PowerPC 603E CPU at 250 MHz. It takes up to 128 megs of RAM through reasonably easy to find 168-pin DIMMs, standard IDE for large and cheap storage. But this thing, I'm taking it to the VCF East swap meet this weekend, and I'm gonna sell it to some poor soul who's not gonna have any idea that we're installing a bunch of goofy operating systems on it. Hope they like BOS. Well, I'm not entirely sure if this computer even works, so I guess we ought to try and power it on. And since Apple loves to be different, we are gonna have to use one of these adapters to connect to a VGA monitor. I have no idea what these dip switches are set for. We're just gonna send it. All we need now is the correct mouse pad. Perfect. Oh, it chimes very loudly. That's a good sign. I hear the hard drive spinning up and then spinning back down. I think we're gonna need to replace that. So these computers open up in a pretty neat way, actually. We don't take the computer apart so much as we just pull out the board, which normally there are 2 screws here, but check it out. There's our motherboard. Wait, sorry. Logic board. The hard drive is right here behind the front panel, and the front panel is held on by fragile tabs. And you have to kind of put pressure in the middle. Ah. Yeah, there's supposed to be 2 plastic tabs here. Here's one of them. All right, more incredibly fragile plastics. So we can use one of these adapters here to chuck in this cheap SATA SSD. We can get back in your hole. All right, will it recognize that hard drive? No idea. Let's find out. Well, whatever's on that drive, it's not gonna boot on this thing, so let me find a macOS CD. Let's see here. Here we go, macOS 9. So we'll install this first, and then we can get into some more interesting operating systems. Now, this might be an obscure computer, but your privacy doesn't have to be. Thanks to today's sponsor, Obscura, the world's most private VPN. How'd you like that segue? I don't know about you, but I'm old enough to remember hearing about the dangers of using your real name on the internet. Boy, have times changed. Now it seems like we're all just an amalgamation of data points. For AI. Now we're gonna have to send 53 data points and a rectal scan just to prove we're old enough to use social media. Well, friends, I'm trying to minimize my data points, and I think you should too. And Obscura hits every point that matters to me. First, it's open source, and that code has been independently audited. Pretty nice. Second, Obscura goes to rather extreme lengths to protect your identity. Unlike a traditional VPN, Obscura's architecture means that while Obscura knows your identity, you have to log into it, they can't see any of your traffic. Only the exit node can. But the exit node can't see your identity, so the 2 datasets literally can't be correlated. Pretty impressive. Obscura also resists VPN blocking and can work where other VPNs fail. You don't even need to link your personal email address to your account. So if you want to try a true privacy-first VPN, go to obscura.com/action to get 25% off your subscription, or use the code ACTION. The less data points on you, the better. So check the link out down in my description below, and thanks again Obscura for sponsoring today's video. Let's give this 5 equal partitions. Initialization failed? Let's give it 4 partitions. Problems were found on the disk untitled, but the disk cannot be fixed now. Ignore. Alright, well the good news is we are booted into macOS 9. The bad news is, it didn't like any of these SSDs, or more likely these cheap adapters, so I dug out this old 80GB Max Tour, which is actually Apple branded. So let's start how we generally start and try to get BOS running on this thing. Now installing BOS is actually pretty easy, but essentially we just need to go into our macOS partition here, drag OS Chooser to the system folder, drag BOS Launcher over. We should be able to launch right into the installer. And now you're going to see how ridiculous that extension is to let us choose the OS. It gives us 4 seconds to choose the operating system. I have literally never seen this message before. Every time I try to install BOS on an old Macintosh, I always run into the same problem, and I always forget that I solved the problem the last time I tried to install BOS on an old Mac, and the time before that, and the time before that, and then I just always forget macOS 8. BOS is not compatible with macOS 9 because macOS 9's CD-ROM driver doesn't work with BOS. You have to use macOS 8. So 8.5 it is. Drag OS Chooser to the system folder. BOS Launcher. Let's try it now. Yes, it's frickin' working. The only thing I had to fix was myself. Alright, so we are going to install this on Untitled 2. We have some more options. And languages. Okay, we do want extras. Yeah. Begin. Initialize. BOS. If I can spell correctly. Alright, hopefully jump cut to install complete. Yes, it's booting BOS! Yes! Oh, it's so fast and wonderful. Look at that. 9 frames per second. 10 frames per second on our rotating GLT pot. But one weird operating system is not enough weird operating systems. Not for this computer, so let's try to install Rhapsody DR2. The goofy precursor to macOS 10, which is basically next step, but with a macOS Classic theme, and of course it installs on Classic Macs. Rhapsody is unsupported. Let's try MK Linux. You should have partitioned the disk in such a way. Oh my god, I have to do all this partitioning? Alright, we are back in the install CD. I guess we're gonna do 7 partitions. This one, quite small. That will be our swap. This one will be AUX root. Are you kidding? You only will install on a SCSI drive? Oh my god. Alright, can we install the 8.7 beta? And we are going to install this to the partition helpfully named macOS 8.7. Yes, really. Alright, well apparently it worked. Let's see if we can boot into it. Yes, it's booting 8.7! What a cursed startup screen that is. Of course, they never actually released macOS 8.7. They called it macOS 9 because they didn't want to have to let clone manufacturers use macOS 8.7 since all their contracts said anything macOS 8 was fair game. So this is technically macOS 9. Yeah, and there's really nothing that interesting about 8.7 because it is just macOS 9. Give it a strong and secure password. I do like how they have this weird menu option up here, signed. In normal macOS, that is not what it says. It should say go. Well, if this thing's next owner wants to really have some classic Mac fun, might as well go even older, 761. Let's rename this to macOS 761. Pop this right here. Install. Alright, installation is complete. I do suppose we should actually mount this hard drive in there correctly. This old plastic is so frickin' fragile these days. If you look at these brackets wrong, they crack. Alright, I think we're good. Connect this, connect power. And gently slide her on back in there. Perfect. Guess we ought to make some sort of a price tag for this thing. Get my totally normal label maker out. This typewriter is just perfectly happy typing on inkjet labels, which is pretty handy actually. All right, we will call this totally normal Power Mac 6500 blazing fast 250. Oh no, 250. No weird operating systems. This way people know what they're getting into if they're interested in my totally normal Power Mac 6500. Alright, guess it's time to find this thing a new owner at VCFE Swap Meet 2026. We're off to Wall, New Jersey.
You're the busiest man over here.
No weird operating systems on it.
I love the reaction video you did for the...
Alright, good luck with that thing. It's got a bunch of wacky operating systems on it. Oh yeah. Thank God it's out of my basement.
Wow. If you live anywhere near northern New Jersey and you've never been to the VCFE Swap Meet, you're doing yourself a disservice because it is frickin' awesome. Not only did I sell almost everything that I brought, but I picked up a lot of wacky stuff. Look at this, Linux for Windows. A Hercules 3D something. Wow, I lost my voice. Look at this cool Sony Vaio. It's running Windows XP. And this, I got a Deck Alpha for 50 bucks. It says it has a broken PSU, but that's nothing a few capacitors can't fix. Oh, there's a SCSI card in here. Some sort of weird video card. I should do a video on this thing. I even picked up a $10 longboard skateboard. You can find anything at the VCFE Swap Meet. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Sean, didn't you just post that your car exploded on the highway? Yes, violently. And that's where you all come in because I'd love some recommendations on what car to buy next. The car that blew up is my 1998 Jeep Cherokee, which I love, but it was kind of an unsafe vehicle. Old and rickety and no rust, but rickety. I'd love to buy a safe vehicle with good fuel economy and somewhere close to the cargo capacity of the Jeep Cherokee that's not a minivan. Sorry, Mr. Connections. I'm kind of thinking Subaru. What do you think? But that'll do it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see me install Linux for Windows, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you very much for watching.